coverage with political analyst Stephen Lawson, who joins us live in studio. Stephen, a long night for the president. First off, before we get to the reaction, the fact that I was in bed before 8 p.m. and 80-year-old president talked for an hour and 48 minutes. How does that happen? They just pump him up with energy drinks? What's going on there?
Look, regardless of what you think about him, I think it's very clear he's built differently. I mean, I was also in bed very early. I think a lot of Americans probably were. It's crazy. An hour and 48 minutes
standing up.
He went standing up.
I've given 20-minute graduate speeches in high school, and I'm like, when is this ever going to end? And that's a 20-minute speech. An hour and 48 minutes, record-breaking length, by the way.
It's nuts. It is blowing past his previous record last year. So he clearly has the energy and stamina to do the job.
I don't know what they do. I know in college campuses it's now a big thing. They have these IV clinics. You ever seen these, Deborah? Where the kids they party too hard on a Saturday night and
they plug in and get fluids.
Yeah, they just go, like, is that what happens? Do they just plug them up with fluids after or before the speech?
It must be. That's a whole cottage industry now. So yeah,
it's unbelievable. Anyway, all right. So again, before we get to your reaction, before the speech was even given, I knew Democrats were going to say it was horrible and Republicans say it was fantastic. We see that every time. It doesn't matter who is giving the speech. I just want decorum. I don't want any heckling. Left, right, or center. And we had some of it last night with Ilhan Omar and Tlaib. We had Al Green, not the singer, get ejected for the second speech in a row. But aside from that, these speeches, no matter who's the president, whether it's Trump or Obama, we don't really remember the speech as much as we remember other stuff that happens, like Pelosi ripping up the script. Like, do you remember the speech that was given? Like, I mean, these are important things for the United States, but at the end of the day, in 48 hours, do we remember anything?
On to the next news cycle.
No, exactly.
It's very indicative, I think, of where they are. And I think there was so much more lasting power 10, 15, 20 years ago with these speeches, right? Like it was wall-to-wall coverage for weeks. People were, clinging on to every last word. Now it's sort of emblematic in many ways of our current politics, that it's a lot of theater.
Yeah.
And the news cycle breaks so quickly and changes so quickly that, to your point, in a week, the ins and outs of the speech won't be as remembered as well.
And I think you bring up a good point, because if you go back 20, 25 years, if you didn't watch it live, you were SOL, unless you set your VHS cassette recorder. But again, I didn't watch a minute of it live last night, but I can wake up this morning and the whole thing's on YouTube. So the immediacy of it, like, you don't have to watch it live unless you are, really politically into it and you want to live tweet it or whatever. It's the fact that I can go to bed knowing I am going to be able to watch the whole thing tomorrow morning when I wake up.
Yeah, there's definitely a caucus of American voters out there who are probably lobbying for an earlier State of the Union address. Certainly well into the night. Started at 9 o'clock, went until, I think, close to 11.
And to be fair, this wasn't me protesting. I'm in bed before 8 every night. This wasn't like, the State of the Union's on, I'm going to bed. Yeah. No, I'm 7:55 is usually when
the West Coast Republicans were very happy last night.
All right, so that being said, there was a couple of really great bipartisan moments. The U.S. hockey team, that stood out to me. I like when everyone stands up and applauds. Any positives or negatives that you found as a political analyst?
Yeah, no, I think there were a ton. There were definitely some uniting moments there. Certainly with the hockey team, the Army official who helped capture or helped with Maduro.
Yes.
There, Erica Kirk was recognized. So there were a lot of feel-good moments, but certainly it was I would say a very base-heavy speech from the president. Lots of bravado, lots of doubling down on some of the things that he's talked about. There were a lot of through lines, but the biggest one was the economy. I think the president was clearly focused on an economic message. I think there was some good specifics in there in terms of trying to boost domestic energy supply, deregulation, moving our supply chains back here. But then there are also some question marks, again, doubling down on this notion of tariffs immediately after the Supreme Court overruled his authority to do so. So it was a mixed bag, but there's clearly a path forward for the president here, and it's clear he's focusing on the economy.
There was a lot of talk about the economy and the president checking off what he has done for the economy. There are some fact checks on how good this economy is compared to what they are in prior administrations. But did he show enough empathy or any empathy to the folks that, all right, the stock market's at all-time high, which is fantastic if you got a retirement fund, but the energy costs are high, grocery costs are high, cost of housing is still high. Was there enough empathy from the president to the everyday American watching last night?
I don't think so. And I think that was a really big missed opportunity for him because as well as some of the metrics that he's talking about in terms of the stock market, there are some prices in some sectors that are coming down. Obviously, people's 401ks are doing well, but there is this disconnect, Mark, right, where people are still feeling the pinch on gas, groceries, and affordability. Now, without saying it and without giving some of that empathy off, which I think is really important, and it was a missed opportunity for him, he did talk about some specific things where it's clear that is on the top of the White House's mind, even if they're not saying it, talking about that energy production. We know energy prices are high, utilities are high, gas is continuing to be a nagging problem. He talked about healthcare and prescription drug prices, trying to rein those in.
Trump RX. I didn't name it. I promise you. I didn't come up with Trump RX. That was a fun line.
And talking about some of the permitting process, speeding up those things to get the cost of doing business and permitting regulation down.
Yeah.
I think those are all really good things, but the connection there, I think, needed to be, we hear you, we see you, this is what we're doing. It's one of the critical...
that line right there would have been perfect. What you just said would have been right on the nose.
Absolutely. And it's one of the, I believe, the critical mistakes that Joe Biden did not do. They continued to talk about Bidenomics as inflation was crushing people. There's got to be that empathy. I think that's one of the reasons Joe Biden lost and Donald Trump won. They've got to meet somewhere in the middle on that message.
I'll tell you what, I had a bone to pick with President Trump. He jumped into my lane last night. I'm going to play some audio. Stay in your lane, President Trump. Data centers is what I talk about.
We're telling the major tech companies that they have the obligation to provide for their own power needs. They can build their own power plants as part of their factory so that no one's prices will go up. And in many cases, prices of electricity will go down for the community.
Apparently, listen, I've been talking about data centers. My boss probably thinks too much, but obviously it's a nationwide issue, and so much so the president referenced it in the State of the Union.
It is. It's an issue that's front and center. It ties into so many areas. It ties into energy prices. It ties into this artificial intelligence boom. Here in Georgia, the Public Service Commission and the General Assembly are both looking at measures to codify what the PSC did, which is say large load customers, i.e. data centers, have to pay their fair share. They have to pay for the infrastructure. They've got to do some of these things. I'm
glad you said data set because you said large load customers and pointed right at me. I was about to get offended, and then you said data centers, not just me. Bringing it local. A lot of stuff obviously going on at the Georgia House. What's the latest on the education bills? We talked earlier with Deborah about the high school cell phone ban. What else do we need to be paying attention to?
Yeah, that was a big one that passed out of the Georgia House of Representatives yesterday. Obviously, last year, the General Assembly and the governor signed into law a ban on K through 8 cell phones in class. Now, this bill this year would expand that into high schools. Passed overwhelmingly in the Georgia House of Representatives. It now goes to the Georgia Senate, where it will likely pass and be signed into law by the governor. I think one thing to watch, as we've seen in the K through 8 bill, is on the implementation side. Every school district is doing it a little bit differently. I think there will be more of a spotlight in high school. Is there a basket at the front of the room? Do we have these sort of Ziploc bags that every kid can? And how does that factor in when there's an emergency situation? I think there's a couple questions out there from parents. The other bill that passed out of the House of Representatives is this sweeping literacy bill, where every K through 3 student, every classroom will have a literacy coach
Oh.
embedded in there to really, I think it's something that the General Assembly is looking at, getting a head start on literacy rates in the classroom. And then another really cool piece to that is every child at birth will be given a book from the state of Georgia to really emphasize and focus on literacy and early learning.
I'm not poking the bear, but is this book a Bible?
No,
Okay.
it's not going to be a Bible. I think that's to be determined. But really, it's just to get parents involved and engaged. In
Just
early
quick
reading.
follow-up. The literacy coach, K through 3, I love that. Do we know where the funding might come from that?
Yeah, from the General Assembly.
Okay.
It will be fully funded through their appropriations from the General Assembly.
Love it. All right, Stephen Lawson, immediate reaction to the State of the Union speech and some big local stuff going on at the Georgia Capitol. You can find out more about Stephen and his operation at dentons.com. That's dentons.com. Hopefully by the time next week when you come back in, we'll have more clarification on where we can or can't watch Braves games next season. I'm still a little confused about what's going on.
I love it. I trust the process. I'm going to buy whatever they are trying to sell me.
There you go. And just share the password with me when you
That's
buy.
right, deal.
There you go.